Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to pay tribute to the Metropolitan Police and the tremendous response to the terrorist attack last night. I thought it was absolutely superb. It's a world I came from before I became Commissioner, and I think I'd just like to add my congratulations to them for taking the offender out just so quickly and saving lots of lives, no doubt. So moving on to the budget, it comes around every year. This is my 8th budget as Commissioner since I took office in 2012. And it's also the first budget since 2010 that has seen any increase whatsoever from central government. That sets the context for this budget. That's a change that both I and the Chief Constable welcome. Firstly, I want to put the budget into context, and to do so we need to look back over the last 10 years. Since 2010, the Gloucestershire Constabulary has had to make £32 million of savings to balance its budget. It's been a core responsibility of mine to work with successive Chief Constables to manage those cuts, and we all know they have had severe impacts and consequences for the county. Central government cuts to the constabulary ended in 2016 and were replaced by a period of frozen grants until this year. So that's part of the context. To understand what happened in 2016, when we went from severe cuts to a frozen grant with no increases for inflation, you have to remember what happened in 2015, and it's quite relevant to today actually. In 2015, I was told by the Home Office, Sir Mark Sedwell, and by HMIC to prepare the organisation for 20% further cuts. We made those preparations. It would have been very, very tricky, and commissioners from across the country, cross-party, were saying this is getting very, very difficult now. I also remember the day that policy changed. It was over a week. It followed the Bataclan attack in Paris, where numerous people lost their lives, and police leaders from across the United Kingdom made it very clear to the government that should the further cuts be implemented, the police service will not be prepared or able to respond sufficiently to protect the public or prevent such attacks happening here in the UK. The only way we could have managed those cuts, and the preparations were made, would be to really further cut into neighbourhood policing, which both the Command for Counter-Terrorism, the local Chief Constable and everybody else sees as a golden thread to protect us and the very core of policing we have in this country. In 2015, neighbourhood policing had diminished to such a level that it was barely recognisable. It's just 5 years ago. I was not prepared to allow that to deteriorate further. I want to see improvements, and so did the public. It's my strong belief, and it still is today, that neighbourhood policing is the core model of policing in this country and core to what we see here in Gloucestershire. There's no doubt in my mind it is the golden thread of policing. Neighbourhood policing was therefore the central plank of my manifesto in 2016 and remains a central plank of my policing crime plan to this day. It will be core to my next plan. I also commend the Constabulary for the progress that they made to protect neighbourhood policing and to embrace it post-2016. It was very, very tricky. As I'll go on to say, there were not enough resources to go around at that particular point, and it was a brave decision, and it bucked the trend across the country where many forces were abandoning it, they were making their PCSOs redundant, and they were reverting back to response-only policing. It was a clear decision made by my office and supported by the Chief Constable, Rod Hanson. Neighbourhood policing has now become the foundation upon what we build all the other capabilities within the policing in Gloucestershire. I also need to be really clear and honest. What we have now in neighbourhood policing is not what we had before the cuts, and it's not where we want to be in the future. It is just the reality of where we are at this particular point in our financial and operational history. The cuts, of course, had consequences. This is important to say as well. From all my work, I am firmly of the opinion that the Gloucestershire Constabulary does not have, and for some time has not had, the level of resources it needs to provide the level of service to the people of Gloucestershire that they reasonably deserve and should expect. That is now slowly changing, and we'll see that as we go to the budget, how things are. It is an improving picture, but at the moment, I don't think they have enough resources to do what the public reasonably expect of them. The impact of that on the public is clear. The impact on the police themselves is less clear, but the research undertaken by Rod Hanson, our Chief Constable, and others is to show that that is a severe cause of stress and anxiety to the officers who go home at night, often feeling they haven't actually achieved what they hoped to achieve. They haven't got to all the jobs. They haven't actually been able to give the service they wanted to give, and it is a cause of anxiety across UK policing and one we're trying to address. But I do say it's an improving picture. My last two budgets, which saw sizable increases in the precept, allowed the organisation to begin to grow again. It was 2018 when the growth began. That was all as a result of precepts that were approved in this chamber, or the room next door, I think, one of them. So over the last 2 years, the organisation has grown by 74 officers and 37 staff. These increases have been tracked by my office and are reported to my Chief Executive by the Chief Constable on a regular basis. So the force has delivered. The increases that began 2 years ago were not just desirable, they were absolutely essential for the reasons you know or we can go into. It's also important for context to note when I took office in 2012, actually this may have been not, well, no, it is right. When I took office in 2012, the balance between funding from central government and funding that was provided locally has shifted considerably. The burden has been placed on local taxpayers rather than central government. 10 years ago, the ratio was 36% was funded by local taxation and 74% was funded by government. Now it's 49% by local taxation and 51% by central government. That's a change of policy I don't see changing for the foreseeable future. Maybe a percentage point here and there, but not a fundamental shift. I don't see that happening. The impact of that, apart from the obvious, we're paying more locally for it, is that if Gloucestershire residents are paying 50% of the funding for their local policing, the local population deserve an even louder voice than they had before. And that's what I've been trying to do over the past several years and what I will continue to do in the future. You know that before any budget, I'm expected to consult the public. You'll also be aware, and I won't rehearse this now, we didn't have the details of our budget until just literally a few weeks ago, so therefore the conventional type of consultation didn't take place. It couldn't. I don't think any commissioner could have really done it, apart from on guesswork. But my deputy, Chris, behind me, and I undertook a very extensive tour of the county this year, and the Chief Constable and I, our two officers, have held Meet the Police events across the county in all the districts. There's one more to do in the Forest of Dean this week or next week, I'm not quite sure. So we think we have a pretty good idea of what is going on in the county and what people think. I also get healthy levels of correspondence to my office. I meet dozens of local people throughout the year. That, combined with a series of meetings with Home Office ministers, officials, related research by my office, has led me to refresh my policing crime plan with new areas of focus. And I presented those to the panel, I think, last time or the time before. I can't quite remember what it was. Now, it's also important to note that those new areas of focus do not replace the priorities that are already in the plan. They are new areas of focus, and they are based on what the community have told me, my research, meeting with ministers, etc., over the last 12 months. The public want to see a greater focus on burglary, and I'm pleased to report that Constabulary has responded exceedingly well to that new focus. They also tell me, the public, they want every crime to matter because every victim matters. So the new focus now for the Constabulary is every crime matters because every victim matters. It sounds like a bland statement, but actually when you don't have sufficient resources to go around, how they prioritise those crimes and how they deal with members of the public and how they balance the most serious offences like counter-terrorism, which we've seen today, and other offences is tricky for the Chief Constable. But the principle of every crime matters is important. We'll come on to that as I present the final part of my budget. They also want to see an increased focus on rural and serious acquisitive crime. I think we covered that here as well at the last meeting, what that meant. What happens in the rural communities is very different to what happens in the urban areas. Both have to be dealt with and given appropriate resources. A significant amount of research has taken place on that. And for the serious acquisitive crime, these are the people who take out our ATMs, raid our more isolated premises with great force. It needs a very different response than just a neighbourhood policing officer. I think most people get that. It's rather obvious, but it needs to be pointed out from time to time. And the other final area is to embrace the child-friendly work which is taking place across the county. So our organisation will be known as a child-friendly organisation. It sounds strange to say that about a police service or any service, but it's really important to me and to the Chief Constable. Now I'm going to come on to the core of the budget, why I'm saying all this. None of these things can be achieved without an enhancement to the way the police and the public communicate with each other. The Constabulary, I'm pleased to report, is in a healthy financial position. The books are balanced, which is a very significant achievement, not achieved by every force in the country by any means. I won't name the ones that aren't, that's for them to do, but a significant number of forces, even in this region, their books are not balanced. And it should be noted by the panel, that's very important to say. I'm going to give credit to my Chief Financial Officer, Peter Skelton, for the work he's done, and to his successive Chief Constables. This is to be my third Chief Constable now who's faced significant budget cuts. The way they have handled the cuts has been noted by HMIC. We've always been graded by either outstanding or good for our financial management. Sometimes people ask what I do, what's the point of a PCC, and a good grasp of the finances is key to the success of any commissioner. Since day one, I've taken the lead on the financial aspects of the constabulary. It takes up a large proportion of my time, but it's paid dividends. Many millions of pounds have been saved, which I can directly attribute to the interventions of my office. I won't go into analysis questions, I can cover those with great confidence. That work has contributed to the strong financial position we find ourselves in now. That doesn't mean we're wealthy, but we're in a healthy, strong position. What it also means is that any increases from government uplift, which is very welcome, can be used for growth. And any increases agreed in this budget, over and above inflation, can be used for growth. That's not a position that many forces enjoy. We are building on very, very strong foundations. We've always planned for the long term, but we've managed the short term. My assumption is that the panel members will have read the papers and they'll have lots of questions for me, so I won't go into great detail on the actual technical parts of the budget. But if the budget is approved and the government uplift programme is not amended to the detriment of Gloucestershire, the position is this. When you combine the government uplift to the growth authorised by this panel and put in last year and the year before, the organisation will grow by in excess of 300 people and staff over the next 3 years. We started in 2018. The government uplift will end in 2020. That's to be celebrated, and it's nothing less than the police officers, staff and our residents deserve. It won't put us back quite where we were before. Next year, we will see 46 officers paid for by central government. That is absolutely to be welcomed. And if in the years 2 and 3 continue in the way they are at the moment, they'll rise to 152. I don't underestimate how hard it may prove to achieve that growth over the next 3 years. Nor does the Chief Constable, and nor does the government. We have been briefed by the Police Minister, who makes it very clear to achieve that level of growth over 3 years will be hard work. It's a great problem to have, but it is not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be easy. You cannot go and buy police officers in Tesco and Amazon. They take a long time to train. We need to get the right people, and you'll know from previous briefings that the training of a police officer used to be 18 months to 2 years. Now it's gone up to 3 years. So from the moment we place the advert, vetting can take up to 6 months. We're trying to streamline that with help from government. But the moment they actually hit the door and pick up their first uniform, it could be 3 years before they're fully operational. So I'm glad we started 2 years ago, because the 74 that we approved, or this panel approved, are pretty much ready to hit the ground now, and that's going to be a great relief to the officers and the public. The good news is that our new state-of-the-art training centre, the Sabrina Centre, which I'll brief you on again, we briefed on it before, opens in May. I'm quite proud of that, because actually everybody was telling me we couldn't do it. We had no chance of getting it open before August, September, maybe even the end of the year, because that's the speed some people work at. To say I've been difficult about it might be an understatement, and everybody who works on that knows I can be very difficult if I want something. And that will open in May. The first course will begin on the 4th of May. And I spoke to some officers in the training department, so will that just be the first sort of 16 or so? So no, on day one, we're going fully live. The place will be packed out, because where we are currently at the moment, we don't have the room, we don't have the capacity to train the officers that are coming through right now. So I can't wait to see that. I go down about once a month to look at the progress. It is going to be stunning. Without that facility, we could not have trained the officers at the rate we need to do to meet the uplift. And I'm very, very confident that we will meet our targets to get those officers through, but it will be tricky. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has asked to be kept informed on the new training centre, as have other organisations and forces. It's going to be world class. It will open on time. It will open on budget. Now some cautionary notes. This is quite important. Achieving the uplift for Gloucestershire is not without risk. The risks that are known at the moment are these. Next year we'll have the SPR's, the Strategic Spending Review. We don't know the outcome of that. That will give the overall budget the Home Office will have for police funding. That's a risk potentially. We don't know the outcome of it. Is it likely there will be a review of the police funding formula the year after? Again, we don't know the outcome of that. So that's a risk. It may go up, it may go down. Last week we met with the 6 MPs in the county, and I'm delighted that they've agreed to lobby for Gloucestershire and for my office and for the Chief Constable with ministers to make sure Gloucestershire gets its fair share and is not disadvantaged. So that's great news. They offered it before when we were looking for other increases, so why wouldn't they? That's great news. Another risk identified by the government, less so by my office, is that to attract the number of recruits in the uplift, 20,000, within 3 years, could get tricky in year 3. And they've asked us to make sure we do everything we can to keep them coming through. Because to recruit 20,000 new officers, and these are new, brand new, not replacing ones that have gone, these are absolutely new officers, plus what we've already recruited before, the 74. By year 3, the pool of people coming through may be limited. I don't think that's going to be a problem for Gloucestershire. A, because we have a state-of-the-art training centre, we can do the throughput quite quickly, we're ready to go, and because of the work the Chief has done to make sure Gloucestershire is seen as an employer of choice. That's really important to us. So I think we'll be fine, but the government is really quite concerned that will they reach their target of 20,000. And absolutely, there is no capacity anywhere in the country to put any more than that through. And that is the view of the Police Minister. I hope there will be more. I think we could put a few more in Gloucestershire. Give us the money, we'll do it. That'd be great. So in conclusion, all of the above can be achieved, but only with public support. And that's where we operate for policing in Gloucestershire. The 10 years of cuts corresponded with significant increases in demand and the complexity of crime, and it's taken a toll on the public, and they've noticed it. And the government's noticed it too. They're not giving us this extra money because they like us particularly, I hope they do. They're giving us this money because they know there is a crisis in law and order and policing, and they are being as helpful as they can to put things back. I genuinely believe that. I've met with the Police Minister, that's their view. This is a difficult time for policing. Crime is rising all across the country, and we need to get back to where we were, and we will get back there. I'm nearly finished, I'll be glad to know. We've actually laid some very strong foundations in Gloucestershire. We began the uplift in 2018, thank goodness we did. And now we have a government that's supporting growth for the first time in 10 years. That is good news. We in Gloucestershire have weathered the storm exceedingly well. The future does look brighter, and this creates many new opportunities. Some are set out in this budget. It's for that reason that I've been able to create a new fund of £1 million for this work to commence immediately. The £1 million, there'll be one-off funding this year, can be converted into long-term revenue funding when I'm given the assurances that the enhancements and changes are sustainable. That fund is to enhance public contact between the police and the public, and to embrace the concept of every crime matters. It's a one-off fund for 1 year that can be converted into revenue in subsequent years when the details of how they want to spend it are brought to me and the Chief Constable in our finance panel. So I commend this budget to you. I've recommended that the precept is increased by 2.7%. This is less than the 4% I'm allowed to increase by central government. And in doing so, this has been a very big consideration. I have taken into consideration the ability of households to pay. It's not a lot of money for me. It may not be a lot of money for you. But if you're already in debt and struggling, even one more additional pound putting you into debt rather than into credit is significant. And I'm also very well aware that the County Council, I think, have indicated 4%, others 2%, bus fares are up, that kind of stuff. So I know if it was only police, they wouldn't have an issue with it, but this is actually quite significant for some people. And that bothers me, but actually I think this is the right thing to do. I've also taken into account my responsibilities to provide sufficient resources for the county to have an effective and efficient police service. I think we present to you a very balanced budget. I think it's a budget of hope, but let's be clear, it's going to take a while before we see all the improvements. I will be holding the force to account for how they deliver on this budget and for their day-to-day policing. And I certainly commend it to you and ask you to look favourably upon an increase of 2.7%, which I think is absolutely right, absolutely balanced, taking everything into account, and will allow the police to grow yet again.